So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per YershiYAhu the prophet that was rejected by Israel during his time because he was so far ahead of his time, and the people of his time did not understand what YershiYAhu was mentioning, while yet he was receiving understandings from heaven and recording the holy instructions very precisely and very interestingly, because people then would have extra documents from heaven, so they would encourage themselves in returning then and being obedient to what then the Creator had said. Not only this, but during this time where we are studying the holy documents more than 2,500 years ago at least, plus another couple hundred years. So 2,700 years ago, we are studying then these holy documents. And because it's a time of the restoration period, we find in ourselves coming out of a transition where then for more than 1,000 years the world's governments, they did whatsoever they wanted. So then once the leader then takes over a position, then they have this predetermined or predetermination desire of governing based from a learning period of 1,000 years of deceit. So then let's try to understand generation after generation after generation, from family after family after family of lineages. Every family generation comes from a time of deceit, a time where they could not have understandings from the holy cities or the holy tabernaclings. The natural fact is always trying then organize the country for a competitive status. Understandably, when there is competition in a country itself, in only one country, then helps the customers receive the best service and the best price. Understandable. However, when there is a globalized market, it's no longer only a nation, but then group of nations coming together and then trying to compete with each other. This understanding is from the time of deceit. Nations, they only compete with each other when there is no directive from heaven. Thus, the world did this for more than 1,000 years during the time of deceit. And it was so bad, they had to come up with this Bilderberg group so they could give some directives because there were no cities. So then these scoundrels, they come together and they decide what the world does or what does not, based from these scoundrels. But then we are during the time of the holy schedule. We are on a holy schedule again. And the understanding is, as far as a nation, they should try to compete when there is a domestic trade going on. Obviously, they should compete as a country only. However, Daniel mentioned then later nations would try to come together and they try to adhere to each other, but they would not. This period of time is gone. It was a time of deceit because there were no cities, no holy cities of the Messiah giving directives. So then the nations, they had to come up with the idea of their own. That's the Bilderberg group. But then we find ourselves on a holy schedule, and then each nation, while they organize their own domestic problems, and they make serviceable for their people, but when they come together, then there is a holy schedule. And the Creator has decided, on the 11th chapter of Daniel, there is then the kingdom of the north, responsible for security. Though they have their own trade going on and their own competitions going on in their own country, to make then obviously a livable place for their own people. But then global wise speaking, there is then a holy schedule. And the holy schedule does not compete with each other. Try to understand this point. During this time of the restoration period, there is no competition amongst the nations when understanding designing. Yes, nations, when they come together and they visit each other, some of these people, they like their products. Obviously, they would be interested in buying them. But there is a point. The dragon is coming with a computerized system, and the dragon then demands every nation, every system, every computer being linked up with him. It is a condition yet coming, but very strongly and absolutely can't be reversed. So nations coming out of the 1,000 years of deceit, they have this mental state of trying on their own, promoting ways of competition with other countries. At this moment, and after 2009, it is an invalid way of thinking. It doesn't work anymore. We are no longer during the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, where then the holy instructions were then set aside and they did whatsoever they wanted. The Creator has a hold of the situation after 2009, and we must line up with it. Not competing with each other, because the system of the dragon is coming and very fast. This September coming, it is the initiation of the dragon's system of banking, direct trade banking. From then on, won't be very long until every system is linked up with the dragon. It is a demand of the dragon. Absolutely can't be reversed. The reversal is not an option. Because when we read Galah, Revelation the 20th chapter, what do we find? The facets of Nahashatan spoken by the Messiah himself. There is no greater person in this earth other than the Messiah. And he said then, and the deceiver means a period of time in the earth. From 1009 to 2009, devil, deceit, deceiver. Some translations they have devil, some translations of deceiver, some translations of mocker. But mocker, deceiving, or deceit, or deceiver, or devil, those are synonymous. The reason why there are so many translations is because when then an author, they want to have a copy of the instructions, and then they want to publicize, they have to change the wording, so then they have these changed then on their behalf, so they can have their manuals or instructions of their own then sold. They can't be identical. But the situation is not a translation, is the meaning. What does it mean? Devil, deceiver, deceit, time of deceit. Those are devil times. Devil times then are gone. We are during the time of the dragon. Then when you read the other sentence, global wise understanding of dragon. Previously we had a global wise understanding of deceit, devil. Doesn't exist anymore. But because of generation after generation after generation and generation and generation of deceit, then people, they get in line, do they not? They yet have this line in their minds from where they came from deceit. So they have to make a conscious decision, and they have to force themselves every time devil comes to their mind. Don't speak it, because then you come out stupid. The time of devil is gone. Every time you think of devil, deceit, think of dragon, meaning precision. Do whatsoever you can to do it friendly and precise. Then you are in line with this period of time. So then, should the leaders of the nations then come around and try to compete with each other? No. The dragon demands the nations lining up with the dragon, not competing with each other. Competing with each other is devilish. Try to understand. Devilish. More than 1,000 years of deceit, devilish. We are no longer during the devilish times. We are during the precision time. How do we get this line of understanding from precision? Then the Messiah spoke of the freighters. When we speak of freighters, we understand logistics. Dragon Mart. Subsequently, then jobs with logistics. Because China is the factory of the world. So the dragon wants China providing inexpensive products, so then the desire of the creator is then completed. Did he not say then the restoration period and the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries would return? Means of refurbishment, reconstruction. And the Gentiles were included as a bonus. So these means, are we going to be in line with the instructions, or we are going to do things on our own? If we do things on our own, later we have to face the dragon. And the dragon has the exclusivity and it has the absolutely utmost straightforward order from heaven, line up the entire world with the dragon. So then, if a person is insane enough to do his or her own way, this person has to face the dragon first, and then after the dragon comes the utmost. Let's say, for instance, though the dragon has the order from heaven, line up the dragon with the instructions. Let's say if a person by a miracle goes through the dragon, unlikely, then a person has to face the utmost. Then there is no way. Because it requires every nation lining up themselves with the instructions. Not even a Hashatan can get around it. So then, do you think the nations can do their own thing? They can't. So when a leader comes out in power and says, oh, we should then work in our country to make it then our manufacturing then refurbished, or then giving more incentives to our manufacturing so then we can be more competitive with the world's market. Do you think this is a proper way of saying it? No. This was a person born during the time of deceit, trying to do his own thing. It's not refurbishing or then having some way of incentive so then they can be competitive with the rest of the world. And some of them, they go so far and say, oh, we have to be then ready for the market and then take on the Asians. No, we don't take on the Asians. We get in line with them. Time of the restoration period, then you find, obviously, infrastructure. How do nations they get in line with infrastructure? There is already a nation providing those materials, so then the world can refurbish itself. What kind of work can a nation do and get in line with it? Logistics. The Messiah already gave the answer. He said then the freighters of the earth. He is speaking during a time where the world is already linked up via the dragon. There are dragon marts around the world, and then the system via computer is already implemented. When this is absolutely in its utmost peak, then the Messiah spoke. The Messiah spoke from a period of the future of the absolutely golden time of this trade of the restoration period. So then what is the best work in the world as far as if a person in a country is trying to then revitalize their industry? Do those manufacturings related with logistics only? The rest of the products are already taken over. China produces every item you can think of. Can nations then come around and try having their own manufacturing against China? There is no way. Because the dragon does not admit competition with himself. Every nation, every computer, every system must be linked up with the dragon at some point. Those were the orders from heaven. Now let me ask you this. Leaders ignorant of the fact of the holy instructions, because firstly, they learned from a place where they did not teach the holy instructions properly. They learned lies. They learned deceits. They learned from a scripture that is from Greco-Roman translation, absolutely scoundrelized scripture. Then they make wrong decisions and they think they can do their own thing. They are wrong. And this is valid then either if a person is a Hebrew in a holy city or outside of the holy city. If a person is then an American or then a person is a Soviet. Or if a person is from Australia or from New Zealand. If a person is from Germany or Poland or France. The holy instructions are for this globe and lines up with it. So there is no such situation then politicians coming around because they have some sense of a power of their own. We are going to refurbish the manufacturing of our country, becoming more competitive with the world's market. Bah! Doesn't understand the instructions. We are not going to compete with the world's market. We are going to get in line with it. As it was said before many times, during the time of the restoration period is what nations should not do. They should not try to compete with other nations. They must get in line with instructions. So for instance, the Prime Minister of Australia is coming around then mesmerizing the people. We should then work in our own economy and making our manufacturing more than competitive with the world's market. He's absolutely wrong. He doesn't prepare his country or his realm for competing with other countries. He should get in line with instructions. This means then providing manufacturing related with the logistics. The answer was already given in the future. Dealing with the ports, upgradation of ports, upgradation of airports, building depots for those freighters, building then obviously a fuel depot, organizing the country, preparing for the Dragon Mart. What would be the best for the factory of this plan of the future, or then the plan of the restoration period related with the Gentiles, is then smeltering of metals. So China can produce, so we can get in line with the plan. So nations, they get in line and helping China to do then the work of the dragon. It's not a bad term. People were taught wrongly. Some people, when they read Galah, the 20th chapter, because those are the names of the devil. You know, those old ladies that spent 50 years in those junky religious establishments, that's the devil's name. Because the whole thing is the same thing. Devil, dragon, or then serpent, or then, Satan or Satan. Those are evil. Don't you get sometimes this learning from a grandpa or your grandma? You know what? They are wrong. They were never taught properly. Their parents taught them wrong, and they learned wrong, and they are teaching junk to their own grandkids. They must understand the Holy Instructions is not the reading of Greco-Roman scoundrelized junky scripture. And that's what your grandpa and your grandma got their instructions from. It's scoundrelized scripture. So then nice people, when they read scoundrelized scripture, they become scoundrels. Religious scoundrels. Though they are nice people. But when they teach the word, they teach junk. Galatia 28 chapter is not the same. You have a facet of Nahashatan as deceiver. A time period of the earth from 1009 to 2009 where there were no holy cities. Pure deceit worldwide. That's why the world is in chaos. During the time of Yohanan until 1009, the cities were around. Then was required for the destroyer. Nahashatan the destroyer then changed from deceit. Now we are talking of the destroyer because he had to destroy the holy cities. Now we are back then on the time of the dragon, means precision. Because there is a restoration period during this time. And the dragon demands precision. So we are during the time of precision. Time of the dragon is not a bad name. Then when the holy cities are then formed on the numbers where the Creator then decides how many cities would be around, then comes the time of the releasing of the facet of Nahashatan again as the destroyer. The same Nahashatan there was during the time of Yohanan until 1009, then would be back. And the releasing of Nahashatan the destroyer comes when the atomic bomb then is blasted. But it's in the future. This is future. At the moment, then nations should line up themselves with instructions, not against the instructions. Lined up with the plans of China. China is going to produce what is required. The rest of us, we do logistics. Because the Messiah said in the freighters of the earth, he saw freighters everywhere in the earth. Then you lined up, you understand you're manufacturing the logistics. Logistics of air freight, logistics with sea freight, logistics with railroad freight, and then road freight, trucks, mechanics, lining up with China, providing raw materials. For instance, we understand China is going through a period where the air quality, because they do the work themselves. What can we understand when nations are in line with China? Well, could not they then smelter the metals for them? Couldn't they come around and then gather themselves and say, we have to come up with some smelterings so then we can do those smelterings for China? And then you find the nearest Dragon Mart and you bring your smeltered already raw materials, smelter, make bars out of them. Crates nicely built, so then the post-Panamanian ships or the post-Panamax ships can return to China with those products. Then we are in line with instructions. So then during this period is what the nation should not do. As long as there are leaders of nations without the proper understanding, they were taught wrong ever since their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. They learn junk, and then the leaders are doing junk. Their perception of God or the Creator is absolutely distorted. They don't have a clue what they are doing. So then logistics, the Messiah already gave the answer. Either we are in line with instructions, or then nations, they get in trouble. During the time of the seed, it was absolutely at liberty. They could do whatever they wanted. Right, wrong, or then not doing whatsoever. But not during this time. We are during the time of the dragon demanding precision, and has to have a flow of events as per instructions. And dragon is not a bad term.